Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is fling. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you are likely to hear fling used is to mean to throw with force. And I'm going to give you a little warning here. Throughout this video, we're going to look at phrasal verbs with fling, and many of them are going to involve the action of throwing something. A second way you'll hear fling used is to mean to move or push something. And many times we're describing something that was done suddenly without any warning, or maybe even done violently in order to hurt someone or to break something. A third way the verb fling gets used is to mean to say something forcefully. So, this third definition might be a little surprising, but we almost want to think of like someone taking their words, right, and throwing them with force or throwing them suddenly and in kind of a violent way. So, that's a bit of the connection here. I feel like as I've read various stories, sometimes as characters are engaging in an argument, you might see an author use this particular verb to describe someone who's saying something with a lot of force. You should know that fling is an irregular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, I'm going to add ing to form flinging. The past tense and participle forms of this verb require a spelling change. And so we're going to change from I to you. And this form, flung, is going to be both the past tense and the participle. I had a student ask me recently, wait, shouldn't this follow that I, A, U pattern with irregulars like we see with sing, sang, sung, or swim, swam, swum? But as you know, English is full of irregulars. And so here's another one. We're going to use flung in both the past tense and the participle form. Now, I told you that there are a number of phrasal verbs with fling, and so that's what we're going to focus our discussion on today. One phrasal verb you might encounter is to fling aside. Again, this might mean toss. And again, toss is similar to throw. Many times when I think of toss, I'm thinking of something kind of underhanded, right? That might have a little gentler sort of approach to it than really overhand throwing something. But again, fling aside, to toss or shove something out of one's path. An example of this might be she flung the papers aside as she searched for the business card. So maybe we can picture kind of a messy table, a messy desk, right? And someone kind of throwing things out of their way as they try and locate something else. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to fling away. This can mean to discard or reject something. An example of this might be the suspect flung away a knife as he ran. So, again, the idea here kind of throwing it down, discarding it. And I should note both of the first two examples here, so flung aside, flung away, those are both examples of the simple past tense. Let's take a look at another phrasal verb. The next one is to fling back. This can have a couple different meanings. One would be to toss or throw something backwards. So, an example of this might be the force of the explosion will fling everyone back. Okay. Here's an example of simple future. Someone's making a prediction as to what they think will occur. A second way to use fling back is to mean to return something. And again, this is usually done by throwing or tossing. An example of this might be the neighbor's balls always end up in our yard, but we just fling them back. Here's an example of simple present. I'm talking about a habit or a routine. So maybe if you have small children who live next to you, you might have this thing where their toys, their balls end up in your yard. And if you just, right, return them, right, using this motion, we can use the verb fling back to describe it. Another phrasal verb you might hear is to fling down. right? So this is another kind of directional. So we're talking about tossing or throwing something downward. An example of this might be, he flung his sister down as they fought. So, again, maybe we can kind of picture brother, sister having some kind of disagreement. Maybe they're play fighting, but this idea of throwing her maybe to the floor, to the ground. This is another example of the simple past tense. The next phrasal verb is to fling in or fling into. And so generally we're talking about throwing or tossing something into something else. An example of this might be, you can fling that into the back seat, right? Maybe you've had this happen where you store things in your passenger seat of your car, then a friend, someone you know goes to get in, right? And then you've got to move this stuff, right? So here someone might be just suggesting, giving permission here with can fling, toss that into the back seat, put it into another spot. Now, let's continue looking at some more phrasal verbs. This next one is a different meaning for fling into. This phrasal verb is used to describe someone who wholeheartedly engages in or maybe begins a new task, a new activity. So you might picture someone who's really excited, really enthusiastic. They are going to give 110%. They're going to give their all to a particular activity. So, an example of this might be, you might hear someone say, I've flung myself into my new job, right? I'm giving all of my effort, all of my attention to this new job. This sentence is an example of the present perfect. The next phrasal verb we'll discuss is to fling off. This can mean that we're pushing or pulling something off of ourselves or off another person. An example of this might be, she flung off the blankets and got up. Right? So maybe we can kind of picture someone kind of forcefully throwing their covers, their blankets off as they begin their day. That's another simple past tense sentence. The next phrasal verb we'll discuss is to fling on. Many people use this to describe to put some article of clothing on rather quickly. An example of this might be, fling on your coat and let's go, right? So here's an imperative, a command. So someone is saying, come on, put it on and let's go. Maybe there's some kind of an emergency, or maybe you're running late. The last phrasal verb we're going to discuss today is to fling out. This can have a few different meanings. So the first, again, is to just toss or throw something out. An example of this might be, I'm going to fling out this spoiled food. Now, I'm going to warn you, this is not something I feel like I hear quite as commonly. Would certainly feel a little more familiar to me to hear throw out here. Again, they would have the same meaning. I feel like when I think about my family, my husband's family, and we see something going bad, it's like, oh, we need to throw it out. And I can't think, or I can't remember of any instances with fling. But a second way you might hear fling out used is to eject or expel someone from a particular place. An example of this might be, the teacher flung the student out of class when she discovered cheating. Right? So again, here I feel like where I live in the Midwest might be more common to hear throw out or kick out, and with this particular meaning, but it would have that exact same idea of you're expelled, you're ejected from the classroom. That sentence, the teacher flung out the student, that's simple past tense, and I think I forgot to mention, I'm going to fling out is an example of the simple future. The last way you'll hear fling out used is to mean to say something casually or carelessly. An example of this might be, fling out some ideas for our holiday party. Right? So maybe you're with a group of coworkers, right, and people want to share some things. When I've been in meetings, I feel like I've heard people say toss out or throw out again, but wherever you are, you might encounter this verb as well. Now, let's just take a quick moment to look at one related word and one phrase related to fling. Sometimes you'll hear this same word, same spelling, fling, used as a noun. And when it's used as a noun, people many times are talking about a short period of wild behavior or even perhaps a brief sexual relationship with someone. So you might hear a sentence, you might hear a little bit of gossip of they had a fling a few weekends ago. So um, you might ask for more details to know exactly what we're describing. But if it's a couple, you might be able to go to that second part of our definition. Another phrase you might encounter is to fling caution to the wind. And again, I'll note sometimes people say throw or toss here. All of these are going to have the same meaning. And what we're talking about when we use this phrase is that someone's stopping with really careful behavior and they're going to take a risk or maybe even do something a bit dangerous. An example of this might be all my friends decided to go bungee jumping, so I flung caution to the wind and I tried it too. So here, someone does something kind of risky. Many people have done bungee jumping and lived to tell, but there are incidents where it has unfortunately ended in injury or death in some cases. So, not a purely safe activity, but kind of a calculated risk, we might say. So, that sentence is describing someone who's like, I'm not going to worry about this. I'm going to take the risk. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.